My story begins one rainy day in early August, 1943, a time when much of the world was at war. My best friend, Hannah Hansen, and I were walking home from school, sharing Hannah's beautiful red umbrella. We were 6 years old then, and in the second grade together. Only a few weeks and a little else separated Hannah and me. While she was long-boned, blonde, and blue-eyed, I had black, curly hair and a darker complexion. We were both Danish, but she was not Jewish, like me. I also wore little round, black-framed glasses, was shorter than she was, and my left arm ended in a point, with 5 tiny stubs on it, halfway down my forearm. These differences meant nothing then, though we would come to know their importance in the days to come. We were on our way to the neighborhood grocery store in Valby, the small town where we lived that was part of Copenhagen, Denmark. We thought the storekeepers there looked like movie actors we enjoyed. One was tall and thin like Stanley Laurel, and the other was short and round like Oliver Hardy. We had hopes they might give us candy. We knew they would certainly make us laugh. "I can make a bigger splash than you," said Hannah, as she ran ahead of me to the next big puddle. "Wait for me," I cried, and ran around the puddle, not wanting to wet my shoes. "Look out," said Hannah, and she jumped into the puddle with both feet, splashing water up onto our coats. We hugged each other and laughed. It was that easy to have fun. We soon continued on our way, eager to get to the store. We often stopped there after school. Big crates of fruit and vegetables always flowed out across the sidewalks in front of the store, and a pickle barrel sat near the entrance, where the tart smell grabbed your nose as you passed by. At Christmas time they would have big boxes of beautiful round oranges, but it was too early for them that time of year. Inside the store, glass jars and open boxes of candy lined the counter. I would put my hand in the jars as if I were taking some candy, and then Hardy would see me and make a big show of running me off. It was a great game we played, for he often gave me candy in the end. We had almost reached the store when suddenly we heard the thunderous noise of planes over our heads, and the roar of tanks echoed off the surrounding buildings. When we turned the corner, we saw the planes, more than I could count, and as they swarmed under the low rain clouds, like dragonflies, each one dropping hundreds of papers with pictures of Hitler on them. Denmark was Nazi-occupied territory then, and had been since April of 1940. The occupation had been a peaceful one, with things going along on the surface of life pretty much as they had before. Some Danes even welcomed the Germans, feeling some sympathy with the Nazi Party's emphasis on strength and purity. People had heard things about Jews being rounded up in Germany and other countries and put in concentration camps, even killed, but it was not certain knowledge, and nothing we children knew anything about. The worst of that was not to be known until after the war was over. All Hannah and I knew was the Germans had been around half our lives, and we were somewhat used to seeing the soldiers about. The planes, however, were new to us. We had never seen anything like this before. Then we saw the German tanks as they came clanking down the middle of the street, each one bearing a flag with the German Swastika on it. They looked like huge metal beasts and made a noise that made us cover our ears. Behind the tanks came the soldiers. They wore brownish-green uniforms and looked like a huge army of ants, with steel helmets covering their large, round heads. They had rifles hanging from their shoulders and shining boots that were nearly as tall as we were. They marched like wind-up toys, kicking their legs high in the air, their boots drumming the ground. An unusually large group of townspeople had gathered on the sidewalks, and we wiggled our way through them. To our surprise, the Danish police officers of the town just stood by, looking at the parade with the rest of the people. Hannah and I huddled close, frightened by the terrible noise and the crowd of people that had gathered. We didn't know what to think. As we watched, 3 soldiers approached the sidewalk, shoving their way through the people. One bulky soldier forced his way up to the fruit stand outside the grocery store and grabbed all the grapes he could hold in his hands. Laughing, he tossed the fresh fruit to other German soldiers who were not marching. Some missed the toss, and the grapes fell to the ground, to be instantly crushed by the shiny boots stamping down the street. Puzzled, I glanced at Hannah. I knew they had not paid for the produce. Directly behind me in the crowd that had gathered, I heard our landlady say, "Jonna, her mother, and Mrs. Johnson are the only Jews in this neighborhood. They really stand out with their dark hair and eyes. The Germans have been talking a lot about Jews lately," she said. She was using the tone of voice I recognized from the laundry room when the women talked about their neighbors who weren't there. I couldn't think what this meant, or what it had to do with the soldiers and tanks. I wondered if she were one of my father's friends, and why she would care that my mother and I were Jewish. Most of our neighbors weren't Jewish. Until that moment, I never thought my being a Jew was of interest to anyone. The synagogue, my Jewish grandparents were one part of my life, and my Danish family and neighbors were another. That was just how life was, and it had not been worth noticing the difference. My father told me I was half Danish, the good half, the Viking half. My mother and her father told me I was all Jewish. Rather than be confused, I simply hadn't thought about it at all. Also behind me in the crowd stood Peter Dam, a 4th grader from school. Peter had dirty hair and wore wrinkled clothes. He was the school bully. He always said bad things about me and would grab my doll away from me. I tried to stay as far away from him as I could. Hannah and I saw him steal an apple and stuff it in his pocket. "Why are they marching today?" I asked Hannah in a quiet voice. "Is it for our King Christian? I heard he fell off his horse, Jubilee, at Amelienborg Castle and broke his leg." In a flash, Peter bolted in front of me with his mouth still full of a bite of the apple he had stolen. He yelled into my face, "Can't you see it's a parade for the Germans who don't like Jewish girls with one hand and stupid eyeglasses?" I could only stare at him. I didn't understand what he meant either. What did my arm, or that I wore eyeglasses, have to do with anything? And what difference did it make that I was all or half Jewish? The grocer, who looked like Laurel, pushed Peter away and grabbed the apple from his hand. Then the grocer, we called Hardy, knelt down in front of me. I could smell the garlic on his breath. "Men in German uniforms are bad," he said. "They could hurt you, so stay away from them. Do you understand me, Jonna?" He shook me for emphasis. "Go home now, and don't play on the way." I nodded, suddenly shy because he was so stern. Peter stood near, listening with a cruel smirk on his pimply face. Hardy growled at us. "Go home now," he said. "Run as fast as you can." Hardy knew what Hannah and I could not, that something had changed in our country.
What you've just heard is the beginning of an amazing memoir of Jonna Christensen's experiences during the Nazi occupation and resistance movement by the Danish people during World War II to save their Jewish citizens. This is David Christensen, Jonna's brother. My family and my father were Danes and very agnostic to atheist. However, my mother's family were Orthodox Jews with strong religious convictions. Add to this family conflict with my grandmother's tavern and brothel, espionage, the Danish underground, an unwanted pregnancy, and Jonna's physical handicap, along with a dangerous escape to neutral Sweden. There is a lot of action packed in this brief period of time that will have you feeling happy, sad, angry, and proud. Jonna was only 7 to 8 years old, and the words are written with her voice at the time. The memories were strong, and she had the facts reinforced through family conversations and even therapy. Sadly, Jonna passed away just as she finished writing a final draft of this memoir. Her family has published her story here so that others may learn from it and to never forget. I recommend that you experience this story yourself by clicking on the link below to purchase this book.